I'm Ardi Saunders, and welcome back to the Happiness Happens show. And we are going to talk today about the math and the science of happiness with Dr. Brianna. Come on in. Hi, doctor. How are you?
Good, and you?
Good. So, how long have you been studying happiness?
About a week.
A week. Okay. So, what have you learned in this week?
I have learned that science has health benefits and it also helps when somebody's studying and when they're solving a problem.
So, happiness is generally a really good thing.
Yes.
Good. Okay. So, have you done any experiments to come to this conclusion?
Yes, I have conducted 2 experiments. One is on when somebody is solving a problem. So I had 2 different groups. One is a control group, which are people who are indifferent and had an average mood. And the other is the experimental group, which is when someone is happy. And I had them complete a maze. Not an actual walking maze, but on a paper. And I timed them and see how long the difference between times it would take and see if they could complete the maze quicker.
Mm-hmm.
And so the results are happy people completed the maze about 2 times quicker than the control group.
Really?
And so I came to this conclusion that when somebody is happy, they are able to think quicker and are able to get past problems quicker than people who are indifferent, or especially when somebody's angry.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So what was probably like the fastest time that you had?
37 seconds.
Wow, that's fast. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you said you did another experiment. What was that?
I did a survey with a list of different things that normal people would enjoy, like parties, balloons, sparkles. I've heard my friends really like sparkles, so I added that to the list. And I also did a list of things that people would find sad, like the rain, peer pressure, and winter.
Mm-hmm.
And people would click the thing that would make them happiest and saddest, and so I put them into 2 different graphs.
Okay, so what age group did you test on these experiments?
I did the average 8th grader, and I also did a happiness formula for the average 8th grader.
Oh, really?
It's really hard to do a formula for happiness for everyone in the world, because some people, when they get a big success, they'll be so happy. But other people, when they get a big success, they will not feel happy with themselves. And that is their own accord. So for the average 8th grader, I came up with a formula that time with friends plus attention from romantic interest minus amount of schoolwork minus pressure from family, friends, you name it, minus amount of homework times if there's a movie, because if there's a movie during school, 8th graders will be 2 times happier.
Oh yeah, that's always true. I have to agree on all of that. So that's really great. So what are the health discoveries that you've discovered are?
I have discovered that happiness dilates stress-inducing hormones, and they help your immune system function easier.
Mm-hmm.
So it is easier to not become sick or stressed when you're happy.
Well, that's great. So, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll have another segment after this break. Welcome back to Happiness Happens. I'm your host, and now we're going to talk about the history of happiness and its evolution through time. And we're going to have Diane and Mickey with us. Come on in. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Good. So let's jump right on into this. So just tell me about where it started with happiness and things.
Well, happiness has been around ever since humans were around. When in biblical times, Adam and Eve found happiness from being with God, And then with the ancient Greeks, they had Aristotle and Epicureans and Stoics. And with Romans, they found happiness in the Roman Colosseum. And it's been with humans forever.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So just tell me about like America and its evolution of happiness.
Well, America is, I would say, the biggest example of happiness we have in this modern world. In the beginning, when America was first formed by colonists, we had the Puritans that came to America, and they were anti-happiness. They did not allow parties, dancing, music. They believed in very modest ways of finding happiness. The only happiness they thought came from the Lord, and when He granted it upon them. And then it got to about 18th and 19th centuries, and they became much more modest in their happiness. They would go out with friends and spend time with their families and take holidays from their jobs. And then we got to the 20th and 21st century, and it got a little bit out of hand because that's when the radio, the television, computers came out, and everybody just thought that that was happiness, that all these new inventions and technologies were happiness, and they would buy all these different things to make them happy, and that's just how they got happiness from. Just where they got happiness from.
Okay. So, what about like the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights? What about that?
Well, Declaration of Independence and Bill of Rights both talk about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that those are inalienable rights that all Americans have, that all citizens of America have. And it is true. All Americans deserve the right to have their life, to have freedom, and to have happiness.
So what about us and our happiness in America related to other countries?
America, we can be the most generous country in the world, sending out all these troops to go help other people, other countries in need. And yet we can also be the most greedy of all countries, where we have all these different technologies and we believe the world revolves around those technologies. But with other countries, they don't always get to have that privilege of having all these different technologies or having the money to go help. They find happiness in the smaller things, like being with their families, getting to have the resources they need to stay alive, and retrieving help from other people and knowing that other people care enough to help them in their time of need.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for having
Have a good
me.
day.
You too.
Hi, and I'm back with the show Happiness Happens. And today, for the next part, we're going to talk with a physiologist, Jody Taylor. Come on in. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Good. Okay. So, what have you been studying just in the history of happiness?
I've been studying philosophers and their thoughts on happiness, and I have found two different philosophies on happiness that I believe counteract with each other very well. And that would be the Epicureans and the Stoics. The Epicureans, they believe that there are two types of pleasure. The first would be static pleasure, and that would be if you receive the required amounts of natural necessities, like if you're thirsty and you get a drink of water, or if you're hungry and you eat some food. The second is kinetic pleasure, and that would be if you are full and yet you keep eating. So it would be if you go beyond the necessary amounts of natural necessities. And so they also believed that happiness is pleasure, and that pain is the opposite of pleasure. So pleasure is when something happens when there is no pain. The Stoics believed that the Epicureans were wrong, because the Epicureans believed that virtues were not the main thing that happiness is made of. Epicureans believe that virtues will help with happiness and creating happiness, but it is not the main concept. Well, the Stoics believe that happiness is the same as virtues, and so happiness cannot be lost. Virtues can not be lost, and so they believe that happiness was built up over time.
Well, that's great. So what time period were they in?
3rd century BC.
Okay. That's great. So, I heard you've also been studying color symbolism, and can you tell me what that is?
Color symbolism is something that scientists have really known about for a long time. They never really gave it very much mind. You know that when you think of the word luck, you'll usually think green, and if you think of anger, you'll think of red. Well, color symbolism can be used to describe anger, like red can describe feelings, like with anger in red, or happy in yellow, or joy in green, or confused in purple. And it's been used as a therapy form because the colors can make the world seem much easier. Colors can also describe people, like if a person is very courageous and has a lot of leadership in them, and yet they have a temper, they will be described as red. Or if this person is very pure and generous and kind, they will be described as white. No racist intended. But also color symbolism, where people can also be swayed by physical attributes. Like if somebody's a redhead, they're usually going to be called orange or red in color symbolism.
Yeah, like you. Okay, well, thank you, Jody Taylor, and thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
So this wraps up our show of Happiness Happens, and we will hope you will tune in next week on channel 534 at 6:30 a.m. Thank you very much.